Just because a state is popular doesn't mean it's profitable. If you're a cash flow real estate investor, here's the truth about these 7 nightmare states that you need to hear. In no particular order, because they all pretty much suck for landlords. Number 1, California. One of the most beautiful states in the country, no doubt. But if you're in the real estate game for cash flow, it's probably not where you want to be putting your money. First off, the anti-landlord laws are a big red flag. California is notorious for its strong tenant protections. We're talking about some serious rent control measures in many cities. Places like Los Angeles and San Francisco, they've got strict limits on how much you can increase your rent each year. And if you think that's bad, wait until we get to number 6 on the list, where they've got statewide rent control. But if you ever need to evict a tenant in California, the state has some of the most extensive eviction protections in the country. This means that even if your tenant isn't paying, getting them out of the property is going to be a long and expensive process. Then there's the issue of home prices versus rent. California has some of the highest home prices in the nation. The disparity between what you'll pay to buy and what you'll get back in rent is huge, making it essentially impossible to achieve positive cash flow. But aren't the income levels in California higher on average? Well, yes, but don't let that fool you into thinking it translates into higher rents. The high cost of living eats up a lot of that income for people, and tenants are already stretched thin. That makes it risky to try and push rents higher to cover your costs. And let's not forget about squatters' rights. In California, if someone squats on your property for just 5 years without you doing anything about it, they can actually claim legal ownership. It's become a game these days where squatters start claiming ownership after just 30 days of occupying your property. It's not right, but they do it. And the cops, they just pass it on to the court system as a civil matter, which takes months through that process to evict. It's a nightmare scenario for any landlord, and it's more common than you might think, especially in areas where housing is in short supply. And then there's property taxes. The rate may seem moderate, but when you combine California's property tax rate with the sky-high values, you're looking at one of the biggest annual tax bills in the country. And we're not done. Don't forget insurance. Earthquakes, wildfires, California's got it all. And that means insurance premiums are through the roof. And it's another necessary expense that cuts into your cash flow. Finally, let's talk about unemployment. Even though the state has a reputation for economic opportunity, it also has pockets of very high unemployment, particularly in many of its urban areas. And that typically translates to missed rent payments and higher turnover, which equals more work and less cash flow for you. California may sound glamorous, but if you're serious about cash flow, it's anything but. State number 2, New York. Particularly New York City. It's iconic, it's busy, it's full of life, but for real estate investors focused on cash flow, it'll be years before you see any. First up, their anti-landlord laws. New York City is infamous for its strict rent control laws and extensive tenant protections. If you're thinking of raising rents or evicting a non-paying tenant, be prepared for a long, complicated, and expensive process. The city, it prioritizes tenant rights heavily, which can seriously limit your ability to manage your property the way that you'd like. Then, like California, there's the issue of home purchase prices compared to rent. Property prices in New York City are among the highest in the country, but the rental income you can expect, it doesn't match up. The average income in New York is higher than the national average, which sounds like a plus, but there's a massive income disparity in the city. I mean, you've got some of the wealthiest people in the country living next to people barely getting by, and that makes for a risky environment for landlords. Now let's talk about their squatters' rights. They're here too. Property taxes, they're high, particularly in the suburbs and upstate New York. Even if you avoid, though, New York City's sky-high property prices, you'll still be hit with significant property taxes that gobble up most of your cash flow. So while New York might seem like the place to be, the reality for cash flow investors, it's not worth the headache. Download a free investor packet at cashflowsavvy.com for some turnkey options in landlord-friendly states. All right, number 3, right next door to New York, New Jersey. And while Jersey might seem like a good alternative to the city for real estate investors that are focused on cash flow, the downsides, they are clear. First off, New Jersey has tight rent control and eviction laws. The state's laws are heavily tilted in favor of tenants, which can make it really challenging to manage your property profitably. Then there's the issue of home purchase prices versus rent here too. The disparity can make it difficult to achieve any kind of cash flow at all. But here's what makes Jersey a no landlord zone. The state has the highest property taxes in the country. So even if you find a reasonably priced property, the tax bill alone, it's a deal killer. So while New Jersey might seem like a good bet because of its proximity to New York, the reality is its high property taxes, strict laws, and high costs make it a state that you want to avoid if cash flow is your goal. Number 4, Hawaii. Sure, it's a dream destination for vacationers, but for real estate investors looking for cash flow, Hawaii comes with its own set of challenges that might make you think twice. In fact, they will make you think twice. First off, Hawaii has strong tenant rights. The state has put in place solid protections against unjust eviction, which means that once you have a tenant in your property, it's not easy to get them out, even if they're not paying rent or if they're causing problems. Then there's the huge disparity between home purchase prices and rent. Hawaii is one of the most expensive places to buy property in the US, but you can't push the rents high enough for it to make sense, because the average income in Hawaii is among the lowest in the nation, and the unemployment is higher than the national average. And when you've got low income and high unemployment, you've also got tenant and management struggles. Squatters' rights, they're on your side here though, and property taxes in Hawaii aren't among the highest, but just when you were feeling a bit of relief here, you've got sky-high insurance premiums to deal with thanks to the constant risk of hurricanes and floods. This is an unavoidable cost, and it's another factor that cuts into your cash flow. So while Hawaii might be a great place to visit, when it comes to real estate investing for cash flow, it's a very different story. Number 5, Illinois, specifically Chicago. It's a major hub with a lot going on, but for real estate investors focused on cash flow, there are some challenges that you need to be aware of. Illinois has strong tenant protections. If you ever have the misfortune of dealing with an eviction, you can expect a long, drawn-out process that can be expensive and stressful. Then there's the issue of home purchase price versus rent, just like all the other states that I mentioned. Squatters' rights are an issue to consider here too, where squatters know the game and can cause problems for landlords, and they do frequently. Property taxes in Illinois are among the highest in the country, often being a deal killer all by themselves, which means even if you find a good deal, the tax bill will almost certainly get in the way. So while Illinois might seem like a good market, the reality is that it's a tough place to generate cash flow. Now let's take a look at a real nightmare state. Number 6, Oregon, which has some of the most robust anti-landlord laws in the country. And the state has implemented statewide rent control, which means that even if market conditions would allow you to raise rents significantly, you're legally capped on how much you can increase them each year. On top of that, the state has strong tenant protections, making it difficult to evict tenants, even if they're not holding up their end of the lease. Then there's the disparity between home purchase prices and rent. In cities like Portland, home prices have soared, but rents haven't kept pace. This means you'll be paying a premium to buy a property, but the rental income won't be enough to justify the investment. Squatters' rights are very much a concern in Oregon. The system is empathetic to them, squatters that is, and it doesn't care about the landlords seemingly at all. But on the bright side, property taxes and insurance premiums are manageable, but the statewide rent control has Oregon as a no-fly zone on my list. As pretty as most of the state is, it's a tough market for cash flow real estate investors. All right, the number 7 state on the list. It's a beautiful place with a booming tech industry, but for real estate investors focused on cash flow, Washington has some serious drawbacks. First off, Washington, especially Seattle, has strong tenant rights. The laws here are definitely more tenant friendly. Even if they're not paying rent, evicting a tenant can be a lengthy and costly process. Home prices in the Seattle area have skyrocketed over the past few years, and rents, they haven't kept up. This is the number one issue for anyone focused on cash flow. Those two gotta match. Generally, with tenant-friendly laws come squatter-friendly laws, so you've got that here too. On the bright side, both property taxes and insurance premiums in Washington are average for the country. California, New York, New Jersey, Illinois, Hawaii, Oregon, and Washington, these states all have some varying combination of high property prices, strict tenant laws, high property taxes, high insurance premiums, and various other factors that make them less favorable for landlords aiming for positive cash flow. If you are thinking about any of these states for your next cash flow investment, turn around, go back, and look elsewhere. And if you don't want to do all the work in finding cash flow real estate, I pulled this video out special for you to watch next. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Take care.